The Process, a podcast about creativity and experimental music. In the world of experimental music, outcomes and accolades for creators can be uncertain and at times seem far and few between. Therefore, creators and practitioners of experimental music must embrace the one thing they will always have complete control over: the process. This podcast aims to understand this creative process by listening to new works and discussing them with their creators. Each episode focuses on one creator and their music. Understanding how and why they create can inform aspiring creatives and help audiences better understand and navigate experimental music. I'm Dr. Doug Bielmeyer, and I'll be your host as we explore the world of experimental music, creativity, and the human need to find purpose in their world and lives. This is The Process.
I rarely write music that is considered, quote unquote, absolute, just music for music's sake. Sometimes I'll write just, string quartet number two or, wind quintet or something like that. But I'm really inspired by, the things around me that I see. A lot of my music is actually inspired by older music. So, like,
Sure.
sometimes I'll hear a cool, Baroque piece or a medieval
Sure.
piece or something like that, and I'll draw from that to create something more modern. So that's usually where I start. I often, before I can write a piece, I have to know its title. And I
Huh.
know that's opposite for a lot of composers. A lot of composers, the title comes at the
Just
end.
throw it on at the end.
Yeah. But like, I kind of have to know the identity of the piece before I can conceive it. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for me, the title is pretty important in that process. So like, I think like, what is this title? I like workshop titles and stuff like that. And then
Yeah.
once I know the title, I can go through my writing process.
And what does the title tell you? Does it tell you the like type of piece it's going to be, or sort of the style? What does nailing down that title really tell
Yeah,
you?
I think especially the type. I mean, for styles, I'll throw all kinds of styles
Sure.
together for my music, but
Mhm.
the type of piece is it going to be, and I guess style kind of fits in there. Is it going to be contemplative? Is it going to be fast and raucous? Like,
Right.
I wouldn't name something like
Right.
Lilacs if it's
Right.
going to be all like hard, guitars and drums
Sure.
and stuff like that.
Sure. Sure.
No,
Or
that's
maybe
not a bad
ironically,
idea.
maybe. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so like I have to know its identity before I can, start planning out how the piece is going to work.
So so you're saying older music might inspire that. And so
Yeah.
is it inspiring music, or is it like a word sometimes? So if you like, I don't know, I'm thinking like Salome. I don't know why I just thought of
Yeah,
that, but
yeah,
that
yeah,
just
yeah,
came to
yeah.
my mind. It's a cool
It's
word
funny.
to say.
I've been obsessed with Salome, especially the final scene
Yeah.
lately. It's just like high art, but also
Yeah.
just low art come together, just
Right.
bacchanal.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
But yeah, sorry. Repeat the question again. Sorry.
Well, yeah. So is it just that? Is it the word that's inspiring you? Is it the music? Is it the both? Just like you said, where like high art meets low art, and you're like,
Yeah.
hey, what if we did a bacchanal, but in contemporary
Exactly. Yeah, I
a
guess.
setting?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess it really is both. Sometimes, and like sometimes I'll hear a quote or something like that,
Sure.
or somebody will say something like, "Oh, that's a very interesting." Like I
Yeah.
never actually finished this piece, but one time I was at a festival
Yeah.
and we were walking from like lunch to the next thing, and I was like,
Mhm.
"What is that like?" That sound, it actually kind of reminded me of Partials by Grisey.
Mm.
And someone said, "Oh no, I think that's just heavy machinery." And then
Yeah.
like, "Oh, there's a title." And so I started writing a piece for orchestra that was inspired by
Bye.
Partials,
Mhm.
but like was gonna go like even further into the machinery kind of thing.
Right.
So I never finished that piece, but
Right.
it's been on my mind. I think it might time to resurrect that piece.
I like that too. I like the idea that it's not just the title, but it's the concept, and
Yes.
it's almost like you take it from your physical day-to-day life, where you're like,
Yeah.
hey, wouldn't it be cool, or like, what if we took this further, or oh, that relationship that happens,
Exactly.
can I express that musically?
Yeah.
Okay, so you get the concept, you got the title, you've got the idea. Where do you go next? Is it pen to paper? Is it pencil to paper? It's not going to be finale for.
Yeah. Equisas in Pace.
Yeah.
God, I was wondering if that was going to come up today.
Oh yeah, that's all my feed is just
Yeah,
like people
yeah,
bemoaning the
yeah.
loss of
Oh
yeah.
my God. And
Yeah.
just handled so poorly, but we'll come back to that later.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I actually do most of my writing in
Mhm.
whatever music notation software I will adopt
Will be
next,
available,
Ardourco. Yeah. But I first start with graph paper. So I
Great.
learned this from
Mhm.
my teacher Michael Keene, also Marilyn Shrewd.
Mhm.
Both of our
Yeah.
training comes from Bowling Green.
Sure.
Just planning out in high detail the form.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you can see that
Yeah.
here. It's kind of like if you looked at this and you weren't me, you'd be
Yeah.
like, what does this say? What does it mean? And
Yeah.
sometimes I look at it like, what does this say? What does this mean?
Yeah.
But basically, I got this idea from Marilyn Shrewd. Like, I imagine the piece in my head. I sit and like, I'm at the premiere of this piece
Yeah.
and I'm in the hall. What do I hear?
Yeah.
And every box is so many seconds. Sometimes I usually do 10 seconds per box in the graph.
Yeah.
And then it's not like theme or melody or even rhythm. I think in texture.
Yeah.
I hear textures first. So like this is I want high textures. I want gritty textures. I want a sharp texture, something like that. And
Mm.
that's what all these symbols and words mean.
Mm.
Sometimes let me see if I can find a one that is here's a good one.
Mhm.
So this is my Jim Jones saxophone quartet that I'm also working on. So you can see like all these squiggly lines. These are the types of like dark and light textures that I'm looking for
Mhm.
in this piece. And so then basically after that, I don't often get chance to write during the semester. So we're
Sure.
coming up on the time that the end of my composition, portion of the year.
Yes.
And so like I'll think of an idea in my mind and I'll either like put it on manuscript paper or I'll record it on my phone, voice memos.
Mhm.
And then when it's time to write in winter break or summer break,
Yeah.
I'll revisit that and then flesh it out. And then after that, it's just composing into finale, which, some people are for that or against it. When I was in undergrad, I wasn't allowed to do it. I had to write
Yeah.
everything out by hand and then
Mhm.
put it in finale. But
Yeah.
it really works for me, especially for pacing. It's not so much for like, let me figure out the notes and rhythms. It's like, let me listen to this and is the pacing right? You
Right.
know?
And it's interesting. So for anybody who's listening to the podcast and can't see that picture, it basically, to me, it looked like an indication. It was a timeline of events.
Yes, exactly.
Of arrivals, of, like you said, there's squiggly lines for textures, but
Mhm.
it looked like maybe not specifically at 2 minutes and 3 seconds this is going to happen,
Yeah.
or maybe that's specific, but it just kind of showed what is the flow, what is the sort of form of the piece going to be. So I find that would be extremely helpful. I used to do it on old marching band paper because I liked the size. It was much larger.
Yeah.
And I haven't done that in a while, actually. So you've kind of reminded me of that. Why don't I do that anymore? But
Yeah, all my students at Berkeley, they know like when they start out a piece, I
Yeah.
expect them to come in with a timeline, and they don't have to do it on graph paper. Like some of them just like to do a typed out list of
Yeah.
things that happen, and like, and it's so helpful because they always come in and like, I'm stuck, I don't know what to do here. It's like, well,
Right.
what's next in your timeline? Oh, I didn't write one. I'm like, would you ever go on a road trip and not know like the general idea of where you're going? Like, I know
Right.
GPS is there, but like,
Sure.
you got to know, like, eventually I should be in Ohio by this time,
Right. And, I think what's interesting about it is I think then you could lean back on it visually, right?
Yeah,
So if you
exactly.
do get stuck, you could be like, well, what should come next? And you're
Yeah.
like, well, if I'm looking at it, it feels really heavy or it looks visually very
Yes,
heavy at the start.
exactly.
So maybe later on it should be heavy again or should thin
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
Yeah,
So you can
exactly.
almost kind of use your other,
Yeah.
your
And
other,
there's,
yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
there's time, like I told you, that piece, Heavy Machinery.
Mhm.
I thought of it back in 2013,
Mhm.
and I didn't finish it. But the graph is somewhere in
It's still there.
and I got to find it, and
Sure.
I can come back to it and like get right back into the writing without having to reinvent the wheel.
Hello from the children of planet Earth.
There's something special about this title, that it's two titles of other things, of
Mhm.
almost completely unrelated things put together. So
Mhm.
there's it originally started as a response piece to Pauline Oliveros,
Yeah.
her sound meditations, and that was what the commission was for, the Oliveros response project. And then there is Pale Blue Dot by Carl Sagan.
Right.
His reflections about the Voyager program and space and things like that.
And so the title is then basically two other titles, kind
Yes,
of, and
exactly.
because it's supposed to be a response piece,
Yeah.
and then honestly, even just watching and reading anything Carl Sagan had to say is always kind of
Mhm.
inspiring. So the pieces for piano and vibes with Brianna Matsky on piano, and of course Chris Graham on vibes.
Mhm.
You may know Chris
Vibes
Graham.
and also crotales. Yeah.
That's right. There's like some other percussion as well. So tell us about that pairing, that collaboration.
Yeah.
You said this was a piece for the Pauline Oliveros Response Project, but how did these two musicians get involved?
Yes.
And What was
So
that like?
the Response Project is a creation of Brianna Matsky. So every year she chooses a composer or a piece to respond to. That year it happened to be Pauline Oliveros, and she recruited Chris Graham to be a part of the project. So sometimes
Great.
she'll do just solo piano work, sometimes she'll do chamber works or duo works like that. And so
Mhm.
it happened to be Chris Graham. And whenever you read a Pauline Oliveros score, she always says, listening is the most important.
Mhm.
It all comes back to listening. And so that's what this piece is all about. You listen there. It's very structured aleatory.
Sure.
It's not completely free, but most of the time you're listening for the other player or you're listening for
Right.
the electronics. Now, I will say the electronics in this video recording are fixed, but normally they should be randomized
Mhm.
live electronics. So there's a max patch that the sounds and the sounds are from the Golden Record, which I can talk about later. But they're all jumbled up and they will play back at random times. And then you are to respond to that. And so yeah, that's the listening part is all about.
Yeah, and even just at the start where we have the single note on the piano and then on the crotales, they're kind of, you can tell it's sort of like I play, okay, now you play.
Yes.
There's this sort of conversation. And it's interesting too, because every once in a while, Brianna would have this look on her face that would just be like, oh, that's happening now. And I wondered about that. And when I was trying to determine, is this like a fixed electronics piece or is this is it interactive with Max? You could tell there was some points where even just the expression on her face was kind of like, oh, this thing is happening now. So that thing that I know, like, so you said they're randomized, but
Yes.
they're fixed things, but
Well,
they're randomized.
yeah,
So she's
of
like, oh,
course.
that's
So-
happening now.
Yeah. So for the purposes of a video recording, they're like, it can't change.
Right.
We're gonna have to do takes. And so I capitulated. It's like, fine, I'll do a fixed track for it
Sure.
that you can play through. And Brianna actually she prefers to play with a fixed track.
Sure.
But other people who have done it, they just open up the max patch and it's gonna be completely
Take the ride.
Yeah. It's gonna be a completely different recording when you do that. So yeah.
Well, that's interesting. One of the things I was thinking of is when you were composing this then, did you compose it as one piece? So, and by that I mean, did you think of instruments and electronics or, fixed media, whatever we want to call it, max patch, whatever. Did you think of it that way, or did you write the instrumental first or have a strong instrumental idea before sort of bringing in the max or electronic component?
No, I always, when I write an electronic piece, the electronics are an instrument. They are a player in the piece. And so that's how I conceive it. Just and there are parts where the electronics will always do this one thing at this spot, or if you trigger the pedal, that cue will be this thing. And my favorite one of those is toward the beginning where it says, hello from the children of planet Earth.
Right.
And then that starts this new, very beautiful flowing section that gets the piece into its more exciting part. So that's always going to be the same. There's another part toward the middle where after they have this 2 minutes of just free improv, where you hear Brandon Burke Concerto number 5. And that's how you get out of the improv section. So those kind of things are always the same. Yeah.
And were those things on your graph paper?
Yes.
From
I don't
the
know if
beginning?
I have that graph here,
Yeah.
but yes.
You don't have to prove it. We want to see. Let's see the original document here.
Into evidence. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, those sections are graphed out. And even so I say randomized, they're randomized to a point. So like in the beginning you hear greetings. And so all of the greetings are in one category of of sound files. And Max is just using a random number generator to choose which one to do.
Sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's constrained. It's constrained aleatory, like you said, where it's kind of like there's variation in between.
Yes.
And what's your philosophy behind that, to have that within the piece?
Yeah. So can I tell you a quick story of how this?
That's what we're here for, stories.
Yes, this story had a father, a prequel that will never be heard. Well, we'll see. Never say never. So when I was teaching at the Walden School in the year 2017, we were part of, all the faculty were part of the Splinter Reads Commission. And I wrote a piece. The title is very similar, The Grand Unified Theory of Everything.
Okay.
And so that takes two, scientific philosophies, the Grand Unified Theory and the Theory of Everything, two titles put together. It was very similar. The quintet with randomized electronics. The electronics were also 4-channel instead of 2-channel.
Great.
And the idea, I loved the idea. It was a great idea, but a couple of things like just made it not go well. It was rushed. I wrote it after my very infamous piece, Dead White Man Music, my harpsichord concerto.
Right.
And I was just like, why not? They asked, they were very few of the professors had time to write the commission. So like the head of the school was like, please, can you do one of the pieces? And I was like, fine, I'll do it. And it was rushed. It didn't turn how I wanted it to be. The premiere was a kind of a disaster. Every rehearsal, I was more trying to get the electronics to work than actually hearing what Splinter was doing. Ironically, Splinter loved it, and over the lockdown, they wanted me to figure out a way to like redo the electronics so it would work, remotely. I said no. I was like, no, this piece, let it die. Which rarely I do, but I say let it die because I already knew like this idea is not a bad idea, and it needs to be workshopped better, and that's how Teach Yourself to Fly from This Pale Blue Dot came about. It's like it was just a imagining of this early idea that I knew should work, but I just had to exercise a little bit more control over it for it to work.
Now, do you think, it's just like a follow-up question, do you think you would ever go back and rework the sort of
the Grand Unified Theory?
Yeah.
I've thought about it a couple of times, and Splinter would really like me to do it.
Right.
This goes back to the thing, do you workshop a piece? Do you like just keep working on it until it's right? I kind of see it as a failure. I've learned from the failure. Let's move on. Now, I'm not saying never say never, because like every now and then I take another listen to this piece, and there are some moments of like magic, but I rather like cannibalize those moments and put them into a new piece than try to make that piece work,
Yeah. And maybe there's something else just like fundamental, like about it too. I wonder too. It's like, oh, well, this is a good idea and the electronics are good, but it just doesn't work for viola. Like it just that
exactly.
instrument, the limitations. So it is everything, like there's a lot of good things, like you said about it, but there's just something, the pairing, the instrumentation, something's not working. Yeah.
Honestly, like if I were to fix that piece, I would either have to go and it's just like not the right amount of aleatory. It either has to be like let it completely go free and just be like just a space for free improv, or like control it a lot more like a Pale Blue Dot is controlled. I have to either let go of the control completely or exercise more for it to work. And then that kind of defeats the spirit of the piece, in some ways.
Yeah, and then I'm always torn because I'm like, now am I doing something that's aleatoric? Like, am I doing it to be aleatoric, or like you said, when I'm sitting there in the theater or at the performance watching this or watching it on YouTube, like is what I'm hearing? Is that working?
Exactly. And I don't ever see that piece getting to that point. So it's to a point where it's like, this is the piece that I wanted to hear.
Right. But it's in all the other pieces, right? It's
It's
it's in all the future pieces.
Its DNA is there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Evan, this has been fantastic. Thanks so much for taking your time to share this piece with us, share your music. Before we let you go, where can we go to find out more about you and your music?
Yeah. So I have a website. It's evanwilliamsmusic.info. If you forget the .info and put in .com, it will redirect you.
Take some notes.
And then I am also on Instagram as Evan Williams Muse. I am technically on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, but let's not get into that. I'm not really there often anymore for obvious reasons.
Well, it's pretty toxic.
Yes, exactly. And then Facebook, Evan Williams Composer. My page is there. So. Yeah.
Awesome. And we can check out your music on some of those places as well.
Oh, yeah. YouTube as well. But the website is a good place to start because most pieces that I, have written and have recordings of, you can find there.
Thanks to Evan Williams for sharing his time and music with us. And as always, if you enjoyed this episode, please check out other episodes in the series, like, subscribe, or leave a comment on your preferred playback app. As always, I'm Dr. Doug Bielmeyer, and this has been The Process.